Imagine waking up one ordinary morning, boiling the kettle, stepping outside to pick up the paper, or scrolling through your phone only to see a headline that instantly tightens your chest. Goodbye, age 67. New pension rules incoming. For so many older Australians, that headline doesn't just sound like news, it feels like your entire future being rewritten in real time. Because the truth is, whenever Kara even whispers about changes to the age pension age, the ripple effect is massive. It touches your sense of stability, your budgeting, your health decisions, and even how long you feel you need to keep working. And today we're talking about something that has sparked confusion, hope, frustration, and in many cases, outright fear. Talk of Australia potentially moving away from the age 67 pension age and what that really means for you. I want you to stay with me right now because what I'm about to explain could affect your retirement timing, your Centrelink eligibility, and even how you plan your next 5, 10, or 20 years. There's been a wave of rumors, some based on genuine policy reviews, some on media speculation, and some on misunderstandings. And today we're going to cut through all of it with calm, clarity, and compassion. Because the truth is, you deserve the full picture, not the panic. So take a breath, settle in, and let me walk you through what's actually happening, why discussions about the pension age are resurfacing again, what the government has officially said, what is not changing, what may change in the future, and how you can prepare yourself emotionally and financially without fear. I know many of you watching have spent decades carrying Australia on your shoulders, raising families, showing up to work when you were exhausted, paying taxes, keeping businesses alive, caring for loved ones, and navigating challenges younger generations simply don't understand yet. And the idea that after all that the finish line could move again, that's not just unfair, it's deeply unsettling. That's why this video isn't just breaking news, it's personal guidance. A clear and honest conversation about where things stand and how these new pension rule discussions might actually play out in your real life. So, let's start breaking it down from the beginning. What sparked the Goodbye Age 67 headlines? Who is pushing for these changes? Whether the government is truly considering lowering or restructuring the pension age, and most importantly, what it means for you right now. Now, before we dive into the heart of these new pension rule discussions, I want you to picture something for a moment. Think back to the day the pension age officially increased to 67. The letters in the mailbox, the Centrelink updates, the news reports telling Australians the retirement goalposts were moving yet again, and the overwhelming feeling that the government was slowly expecting everyday people to work longer and longer just to receive what they had earned through a lifetime of contribution. For many of you, that shift didn't just feel like a policy update. It felt like a broken promise, a silent message that your years of service and sacrifice weren't valued the way they should be. And now, with headlines swirling about Australia possibly stepping away from the age 67 requirement, a lot of emotions are resurfacing. Hope that maybe the government finally understands the pressure retirees face. Fear that changes could be confusing or selective, and skepticism because at the end of the day, many older Australians have learned to believe it when they see it. So here's where things get complicated, and why so many experts say this moment is different. For the first time in years, multiple forces, economic pressures, workforce shortages, demographic data, healthcare strain, and political messaging are colliding to make the conversation about the pension age unavoidable. On one side, you have groups arguing that the pension age should not be increased further, and in fact should be brought back down because Australians are living longer, but not necessarily living healthier. They point to rising chronic health conditions, the difficulty of manual labor past 60, and the reality that older workers face discrimination that no government policy can magically fix. On the other side, you have economists warning that Australia's pension system may not be sustainable unless major changes are made, not only because of the number of retirees, but also because younger generations are struggling to keep up with taxation pressures. Then you have politicians who are trying to balance all of this without alienating one of the most important voter groups in the country, seniors. And in the middle of all this noise, everyday pensioners are simply asking, what does this mean for me? Should I delay my retirement plans, bring them forward, or ignore all the rumors? That's why this conversation matters, because whether the pension age is changed, reviewed, debated, or left untouched for now, the impact on your peace of mind is real. And what we're seeing now is not just idle talk. It's the beginning of a bigger reshaping of how Australia approaches retirement, eligibility, and financial safety for older citizens. The phrase, goodbye age 67, isn't just a catchy headline. It reflects a growing belief that the current rules might not fit the reality of modern aging. So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly where these discussions started, who is driving them, what scenarios experts believe are most likely, and how you can protect yourself and your plans no matter which way the government decides to lean. To truly understand why the phrase goodbye age 67 is suddenly everywhere, we need to rewind and look at how Australia even ended up with a pension age of 67 in the first place. Because this wasn't something that happened overnight or by accident. It was the result of nearly 2 decades of gradual policy shifts that were based on assumptions which today, many experts argue, no longer reflect the real lives of older Australians. When the increase from 65 to 67 was first announced, the argument was simple on paper. People were living longer, staying healthier for longer, and therefore could work longer. But on the ground, that logic didn't match the reality for millions of Australians whose work involved their backs, knees, shoulders, and lungs, not just a computer screen and a swivel chair. And now, after years of rising living costs, housing pressures, energy bills, declining real wages, and the overwhelming feeling that retirement is becoming harder, not easier. Australians are questioning whether age 67 was the right call at all, and the government knows it. That's why the latest round of discussions around pension rules feels more serious, more urgent, and frankly, more politically risky than anything we've seen in years. Multiple review bodies have flagged that older Australians are retiring earlier anyway, often not by choice, but because of health issues, disability, caregiving responsibilities, job loss, or being pushed out of the workforce by employers who quietly prefer someone younger and cheaper. In fact, a significant number of Australians never make it to 67 in stable employment, which means they often spend the years before pension eligibility struggling, exhausting savings, or relying on job seeker payments that weren't designed for older workers. So when you hear talk of shifting away from age 67, whether through lowering the age, offering early access pathways, introducing category-based rules, or restructuring eligibility, it's because the current system is cracking under pressure. But here's the part that affects you most. While politicians are cautious about making promises, they're also aware that the public mood has shifted dramatically. Seniors aren't just asking for clarity, they're demanding respect, transparency, and systems that acknowledge the truth that not all work is equal. Not every 67-year-old is the same, and not every Australian has the luxury of an extended, healthy working life. And that is why these conversations are gaining traction. The government is now navigating a tightrope, maintain economic stability without punishing older Australians who have already given decades of service. And as these debates intensify, you need to know exactly what is on the table, what is likely, what is unlikely, and what you should prepare for, not out of fear, but out of confidence and control over your own retirement journey. Now, let's break down the real engine behind this sudden wave of pension age speculation. Because despite what some headlines suggest, the push to rethink age 67 didn't start with a politician making a bold promise. It started with mounting evidence that the system is no longer aligned with how Australians actually age, work, and live. And that's where the story becomes both alarming and hopeful at the same time. For years, government reports quietly noted something most of you already knew from experience: the assumption that Australians could comfortably work well into their late 60s was based on averages that didn't tell the full story. Yes, people are living longer, but they're not living healthier longer in a way that supports 2 additional years of workforce productivity. In fact, chronic health conditions, arthritis, reduced mobility, stress related illnesses, and age discrimination hit workers hardest between ages 60 and 67, pushing many out of employment before they're ever allowed to access the pension. And the uncomfortable truth governments don't like to admit is that hundreds of thousands of Australians aged 60 to 67 are stuck in a financial no man's land, too old to find stable work, too young for the pension, and forced to burn through savings, take on debt, or scrape by on job seeker payments that are far below the poverty line. When advisory bodies started highlighting this gap, they weren't doing it out of sympathy. They were doing it because the data showed that the age 67 rule wasn't just difficult, it was economically inefficient. Older Australians pushed onto job seeker often cost the system more in the long run because prolonged financial stress leads to poorer health outcomes, higher medical spending, and a greater reliance on emergency services and support programs. And then came the broader demographic pressure. Australia's population is aging rapidly with more retirees and fewer young workers to support the tax base, which means the country can't afford to keep pushing people past their physical limits. Add to this the workforce shortages in healthcare, education, aged care, transport, and trades. And suddenly, the government has found itself in a position where the age 67 setting is causing more problems than it solves. That's why the words new pension rules started appearing, because policymakers began quietly considering adjustments that could relieve pressure on older Australians while still maintaining economic stability. These discussions include flexible pension ages, early access pathways for manual workers, staggered eligibility bands, medical based retirement options, or even restoring part of the pension age to 65 for certain groups. And while nothing official has been announced yet, the mere fact these ideas are being discussed at the highest levels shows one thing clearly: the age 67 rule is no longer the untouchable permanent fixture it once seemed for you. This means awareness is power. You deserve to understand not just the rumors, but the underlying forces shaping these potential changes. Because the better you grasp what's driving the conversation, the easier it will be to prepare, plan, and stay protected, regardless of what the government decides next.